Coming up on NET television, a very special edition of Backyard Farmer at the Nebraska State Fair in Grand Island. Hello everyone, I'm Hank Bounds. I want to take a moment to congratulate the University of Nebraska Extension and NET television as we celebrate 65 years of Backyard Farmer, the longest running locally produced television series in the nation. Backyard Farmer has built a regional reputation for being the leader in all things gardening through the cooperation of two university departments, NET and IANR. It's just one of the many ways the university serves the interest and needs of farmers, gardeners, and all who share a love of the land. Please enjoy this episode of Backyard Farmer.
Hello and welcome to another great hour of Backyard Farmer, answering all of your great gardening questions. I'm your host, Kim Todd. We are so glad you could join us out here at Raising Nebraska in Grand Island. This is a taped show, so you cannot call in. You can still send us your emails. That address is byf@unl.edu. Attach those pictures as JPEGs, make them as clear as you can. Tell us where you are in the state, or we can't answer your question very well. We also start our show always with samples. Our great panel has brought in lovely samples tonight. We're going to start with Jonathan in the bug chair with something in a box.
Yes, we have some Yellowjackets here in this box tonight. Yellowjackets are social wasps that a lot of us are quite familiar with because they're the ones that most often sting us here in this time of year. If you go around the state fair today, you may see them flying around some of the trash cans and things like that. Kind of an interesting wasp. The queens, like one of the ones that you see here in the box, they start a colony in the spring. Some of them build a nest in the ground. Some of them build a nest in trees. Some of them build in wall voids and places like that. But they all end up constructing this sort of object that you see here. Kind of looks like a skull maybe, or a football. And it's a bunch of paper that they make with their mouth and with plant fibers. And they glue it together. And if we cut this in half, you would see several tiers where they start to raise their workers in. Those workers take over all the jobs that the queen does at first. And then she switches over to just making more and more workers throughout the summer. And during the heat of the summer, they want to eat meat. So in June and July, they're looking for protein. They're cutting up spiders and caterpillars, eating those. They'll eat roadkill. That's a really horrifying sight to find sometimes. They'll also get into trash and eat ham sandwiches and things like that. But at this point in the year, they've switched over to sugar food. They want fruit and beer and Pepsi, all those different things that we want at this time of year as well. And so we interact with them more, and they're more defensive now because they're making new queens. And so they may be more likely to sting you as well. If you get Yellowjackets or you mow over top of them, you can treat that colony at night with an aerosol product like you see in the store. Those will fill the nest up with a whole bunch of insecticide and coats everything, and it will take care of those stinging pests for you. But I wish that people wouldn't try and kill them all the time, because they are essential predators in the landscape. It's just that sometimes they don't like us very much. So if you have one in a problem spot, treat it. But if it's out on the far part of your landscape, just try and let live and let live. Let them be out there.
Perfect. All right, Jonathan. And the nests are really cool.
Yeah, and it smells good too. If you
All
want.
right, I'll take your word for it, just in case. Okay, Bill, I have
a weed.
Weed.
So this is a weed. This is a foxtail barley. This is a weed that you probably don't find in your yard, but you might find along a roadside or maybe in a bed or a wet area. And the reason that you don't see it in your yard very much, but in those other areas, is because it doesn't handle being mowed very well. If you mow it frequently, this guy just can't handle that, and it will die. So if you have it in your lawn, regular mowing will help out. If it's in an area you don't want, just pulling it out is probably the best way to do it. It's really short-rooted. We see a lot alongside roads because it's really, really tolerant of salt soils. And so the salt from the road in the winter gets into those soils, and this particular grass can handle that. So just foxtail barley is kind of cool with these really big long awns on the seed head.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. You actually identified a weed.
Look at me, end of the year.
All right, and Kyle, shall we admit where we found this sample?
This may or may not have come from a garden that backyard farmers are in charge of. And actually, I think it smells a lot better than Jonathan's probably does. But here we have downy mildew of basil, and pretty severe infection. All of these blackened, shriveled leaves are a result of this fungus. So downy mildew it's a fungal pathogen. Can attack quite a few different plants, trees included, as we saw earlier today. There are a few fungicides that you can spray, including a lot of copper products can work really well to help control this fungus. But one of the best ways to prevent it from actually coming into your garden is to just make sure that you're buying certified disease-free planting stock. That's a great way. And unfortunately, if you were going to use this to make pesto, it might not be the right color. So I would just recommend pulling these out if they're in your garden.
All right, and we do demonstrate what can happen to you. So I guess that's the good thing about the Backyard Farmer Garden. All right, Elizabeth, what do you have for a sample today?
I have a sample of, believe it or not, it's okra. And I know there's a lot of people, we're out at Raising Nebraska outdoors, you saw this, you're like, what is it? Is it a hibiscus? Is it pretty? What is it? It is edible okra. Now, I say most of it's edible. Ideally, we want it to be fairly small. This is the All-America selection called Candle Fire. So this is one of the new ones that they just came out with this year. Now, the thing with Candle Fire, it's a short okra, if you notice. It's not a super tall one. Some of the more heirloom ones will get 6 foot, 5 foot tall, things along those ones. But this is a short okra. It's a red okra. It's spineless, and it's really nice. The thing about okra, super heat tolerant. A really great crop. Now, you have to get past the slime of the interior of the seeds, but they are a good vegetable to go ahead and eat. Be careful as they get bigger, they get a little woodier, and then you gotta boil you gotta boil them. And the smaller ones are gonna be more tender. Now, as I was doing more research on the All-America Selection website, it said that the seeds could be dried and used as a caffeine-free coffee substitute. I've heard lots of other coffee substitutes before, but I've never heard okra seeds before. So based on the seeds that we have set on in the Raising Nebraska Outdoors, I think we might have a good seed source to go ahead and try it this year.
Caffeine free?
Caffeine, I don't know why.
And what is the point with that?
I don't know, but it's a possibility. So just, why not? Give it a try.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. All right, we start with picture questions. You get the first round of pictures, and they're all kind of related. The first one is, this person found this on their tomato plant.
Okay.
They wonder, what are those eggs on that caterpillar?
Okay. So what we're looking at here is the tobacco hornworm. We can tell because he has a red tail there on his rear end, the opposite end of his head. If he were a tomato hornworm, he would have a blue tail instead. And what you see on his back there are not actually eggs of the caterpillar. They are pupal cases of a wasp that is devouring that insect from the inside out. They don't have a common name. They're called Cotesia congregata. It's a little tiny braconid wasp. And the mom comes along and she just happily stings all over the caterpillar. And when she stings it, she introduces a virus. The virus preoccupies the caterpillar's immune system. And then her babies are free to devour it from the inside out, much like the horror movie Alien. That's what's occurring in that caterpillar right now. And when they're ready to emerge as adults, they bore their way out and they make this silk cocoon around themselves. And so there's these pods, these jars on her back that the wasps are going to come crawling out of here soon. If you see a caterpillar like that, don't destroy it. We always say to kill the hornworms by plucking them off. But that one you can leave as sort of a grenade. It will explode with wasps, and those wasps will go around and help to control lots of other caterpillars for you next year.
And on that note, we have 2 more pictures for you rather rapidly, which would be a grand, that's a Bill picture. So we'll go straight to Bill with the next one. And that would be, Bill, what? We have this person wondering whether we need to identify 3 different grasses.
Yep. So we have
weedy grasses in her particular landscape.
So these are common grasses we see right now. It's foxtail, crabgrass, and windmill grass. They're annuals, and so this is something. I think that the email said that she used the pre, which is possible if you put down your pre's too early. You can get breakthrough of these annual grasses. You can look at all those pictures. There's a lot of seeds on those pictures. So there's a lot of seed in the soil, and so we wouldn't really recommend control right now, especially if you have a lot of them, because they're going to die when the frost comes in, and the seed's already there, more than likely. If you had maybe one plant of crabgrass, you might want to pull that guy out so it doesn't disperse its seed. But if you have a bunch of them anyways, the more effective strategy is to use your pre-emergence herbicides, and don't be too early on those applications. It's always tough to time that in the spring. And if you do get some breakthrough, the control when they're really small in June is really the best way to do it.
All right, thank you, Bill. All right, Kyle, you have a couple of pictures here, and these are both tomatoes.
Okay.
The first one is one of 6 celebrity tomatoes that were planted. The rest have normal fruit. Okay. She wonders what those odd spotted things are on that one.
Yeah, so it looks like that is a viral disease. Tomato spotted wilt virus, most likely, can cause those kind of rings, those lighter rings that are on your tomatoes. Unfortunately, one of the things that this virus does is it prevents the fruit from ripening completely. So you probably don't want to eat those tomatoes just because they're unripe. I'd recommend just roguing out the affected plants and hope that the other ones look okay.
All right, and your second picture in this round, I believe, this is from a Syracuse viewer. She says this plant was sprayed by herbicide.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a very, very deformed tomato. As I was doing some research on it, it was interesting. I was able to find pictures of tomatoes that looked very similar that came from Fukushima, Japan, shortly after the reactor exploded a couple of years ago. So, but yeah, this deformation of tomatoes can happen from a few different things. A general term for it is cat facing. Now, this is much more than just a cat's face. But herbicides, especially those growth regulator herbicides such as 2,4-D or dicamba, can cause symptoms like this. Also, if you have extreme temperature fluctuations as well, you can really, that can cause those abnormal growths too. Nice thing is, even though the tomato looks pretty nasty, it's going to be fine to eat. So if you don't mind having gnarly looking fruit, it's still going to be just fine to put on your salad.
I'm thinking I'm not putting that on my salad. All right, Elizabeth. So you have a couple of questions about ornamental grasses from 2 different viewers. The first is images of our giant Ravenna grass. And his question is how to deal with them as far as cleanup and fertilization. And sort of the related question is a viewer who says the center dies out every spring. They've tried to fill in soil, replant. What can you do to keep those ornamental grasses from doing that?
And with those ornamental grasses, we usually recommend that you let them stand over the fall and winter. Reason for that, it adds winter interest, and also it helps to protect that crown so we don't have a lot of snow load that just sits right on top of that crown. Now, some of the grasses, as they get larger, we'll see that center really die out. And that's your indication that, hey, I need to divide that, because like he said, that center's not gonna fill back in with time, no matter how much time you give it. So that's your chance to go ahead, get a sharp spade out, chop, chop. Do it early in the spring as it first starts to emerge, so you know what portion is dead and what portion is alive. And then you take those chunks out, and then you start other grass clumps somewhere else, or share it with your friends or things along those lines. But we really like to see that grass just stand tall over the winter. No fertilization at this point in time when it comes to a lot of different plants, just because we want them to shut down for the season. And they really don't require much fertilizer anyway, those ornamental grasses. So, you know, next spring, get your spade out and start making friends.
All right, and hope you have some with sharp spades.
Sharp spades to come help.
That. All right, Elizabeth. Well, we start our first segment with something that is also going on in our backyard farmer garden. It's filled with ornamental, beautiful plants. Some of them get pretty darn tall, and they can really be impacted by wind, by rain, all those sorts of nature's wondrous, not so great stuff that causes them to flop over. So in this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about what you can actually do earlier in the season, probably, to be able to keep that from happening. Mother Nature can give us some awesome things like a total eclipse of the sun. She can also bring us things like microbursts, downbursts, thunderstorms that pop out of anywhere, huge winds. And we talk about what we can do with woody plant material, or what we should do. Of course, you call an arborist and get that taken care of as soon as possible if it's a hazard. But we don't really talk about what you do with late season perennials that may have been tipped over or smashed or torn all to pieces, especially since they're supposed to look good late in the season. You need to think early in the season about caging the ones that can't be cut back. And this is a good example. The weight of this and the size of the stems, if you cage, you're going to have to come up with something that is anchored so well into the ground that it's not going to tip over in the wind. That can be an issue with lightweight cages. Tomatoes will tip over. With the grasses, you actually can use twine or string and posts and almost make sort of a girdle, if you will, or wind that string around so as the plant grows up and through it, it is still supported. The unfortunate thing is with these plants, when they do flop like this, the chances of getting them to stand back up straight again for the rest of the season are slim and none. Our asters are an example of a plant that we cut back by 1/3 so they wouldn't flop. You can also see that we have a Rudbeckia, this is herbstone, with really, really strong stems. And those stems actually allow that plant to stand up despite the wind and the water. One of the things that can also cause plants to flop is too much water. This is a great example. This is one of the Liatris, and this is one that likes it dry. You can see where it's been too wet. You can see the pattern of the wind. You can see it standing up straight. And deeper down into the pond or into the rain garden here, you can also see the pattern of too much wind, too much water, plants that are top heavy that really have fallen over. So think in terms of the right location for those plants. You can't really tell Mother Nature how much wind and how much water to bring you, but what you can do is in the spring, remember which plants really needed a little bit of support or a little bit of cutting back so you don't have to deal with the flop. You know, we do love our tall plants, our cup flowers and those kinds of things, but I think next year we are going to remember to put our arms around them in a loving fashion, keep them from falling over.
Hug. Everybody wants a hug.
Everybody wants a hug. All right, Jonathan, you have a series of 3 picks this time. Starting with this beastie, and she's wondering what this is. Is it a good guy? Is it a bad guy? What does it turn into when it becomes one or the other?
I'm pretty sure that this is a bad guy. It looks a lot like Petunia budworm. We were talking about this before the show, and that is a pest that we had during the live Q&A as well before our session here. It's something that bores into the flower of the plant and it consumes it from the inside out before it actually opens, and they're resistant to most of our insecticides. So it's best to try and plant something else. Unfortunately, there's not a lot that we can spray for control of that particular pest. If you're catching them now before they pupate and turn into moths next year, you can destroy that caterpillar and hopefully deal with fewer of them next year.
All right, and your second picture I think is
Another caterpillar.
Yeah.
This one looks to be the yellow striped armyworm. I think it's a sergeant if we look at the chevrons there on the back, if we take account of those. So the yellow striped armyworm can be a pest of tomatoes and many other plants. I think that we had another picture where it had bored into some tomatoes and actually consumed some of that fruit, but they also feed on the leaves. This is a pest that you could start with right now. You could use spinosad to try and control, but it's really going to be hit or miss when it's this large. You'll want to be monitoring for them next year, seeing if you see any moths landing and laying copious amounts of eggs on the undersides of leaves. And when you start to see that, start treating with a BT type product so that when the caterpillars hatch and are small, they eat that and are killed. But once a caterpillar gets this large, it's really hard to control. I mean, it's battery sized, Kim, look at it. It's a AAA.
Yeah, exactly. And
there's the damage that it caused on some of those tomatoes. So it'll eat the tomato flesh, it can get inside the tomato, it can look a lot like tomato fruit worm type damage as well. But it looks just slightly different when you start to get that caterpillar out and take a close look at it.
All right, excellent, thank you, Jonathan. All right, so turfage, Bill.
Turfage.
Your next question is, this is a Loop County viewer. New lawn using a landscaper's seed mix, nice stand, but has this strange other turf-like thing in it. grows quickly, lies flat to the ground, pulls easily. She wonders what this is and how she can get on top of this particular grass.
Yeah, this is barnyard grass. It sometimes can get into the seed, or it can be there when you started to reestablish that lawn. It doesn't really like frequent mowing too much, and so it's generally something you see in new seedlings. It is also an annual, so it can make a lot of seeds, but just like the crabgrass and the goosegrass, the foxtail, it's an annual, and most of our pre-emergence herbicides will control this. So if you're worried about it for next year, going out with the pre in the spring will help with the barnyard grass. So.
All right, excellent, good. That good old stand of grass makes a big difference.
It really does. It's all about ecology.
Okay, on that note, Kyle, you have a really simple question, but it's what's wrong with my cukes this year?
Actually, it looks like there may be some insect feeding
Yep.
on the cucumbers. So potentially from a cucumber beetle. Thing about the cucumber beetle is they can also spread a bacterial wilt disease of cucumbers too. So if you have cucumbers that get full fruit, but they do have a few cracks on them, be thankful that you don't have a bunch of wilted plants due to the bacteria in there. And even though they are cracked, they're still going to be perfectly fine to eat. Cut them open, and the fruit inside should be just fine. As far as control, Jonathan, any?
Yeah, there's the spotted variety and the striped variety. I bet you can guess how we tell them apart based on their name. But as a beetle, they're relatively easy to control with some of our insecticides. Neem works well against them. More broad spectrum, you would look at something like 7 or bifenthrin against this pest, but you'd have to be out there monitoring your garden early in the season because we can see successive generations of these beetles. You definitely want to try and take care of them because you don't want bacterial wilt. It just completely ruins that plant. So definitely try to get out there with neem if you're organic minded, 7 if you don't mind using a more powerful insecticide.
Gotcha. All right, Elizabeth, this is a Hastings viewer. Concord grapes set a lot of clusters. They mostly fall to the ground before they even begin to get ripe. He's had this happen for several years, and he used to get 20 gallons of Concords off these vines. So these are pretty old. He's kind of tried a lot of different things to keep this immature early grape drop from happening.
And on a lot of fruit crops, what we'll see is they'll put on way too much fruit than what they can sustain long term. So what they do is they abort the extra fruit that they don't need. So that could be one instance. We could be looking at, okay, when they were blooming and setting on fruit, did they have more water, or did the water decrease as the season went along? If the amount of water decreased as the season went along, they think, okay, there's a lack of water. I'm not going to be able to sustain these. I might as well abort them now. There are some different fungal infections that can also cause some premature fruit drop too in grapes. And so that could be an option for them. But if the leaves look fine, I didn't see anything else on, I didn't see a bunch to know if there was any fungus on the bunch, or I guess Kyle didn't see any fungus on the bunch because he didn't see it. But that would be another thing, is they might need to just send a sample in to see if they can find anything that might come back other than environmental.
All right, excellent, thanks. Well, our backyard farmer garden is just fabulous right now as we go into the fall of the season. And this year we've been concentrating on our All-America selections. Here's Extension Educator Terry James to tell us what's going on this week in the backyard farmer garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we're looking at another one of those 2017 All-America Selection winners. We're looking at another pepper. It's called Sweetie Pie. This one is also a sweet pepper, so anyone would be able to eat it. It does very well under hot and humid conditions, and it's very attractive. It'll live really well in containers, so if you do live in an urban area, this would be a great one to put in a container on your patio. These are very small peppers. They're about 3 ounces, 2.5 inches by about 3 inches. So they're kind of like those ones that you buy in the grocery store in those bags. They are so much fun to grow. They are great to get kiddos to start eating peppers because they are great fun colors. They range from the green, yellow, orange to the great red. So try these peppers, Sweetie Pie. Come back to the Backyard Farmer Garden and check them out. You can even maybe find a master gardener here to give you a taste of one.
Well, you know, that was great, and we're looking forward to later in our show doing a tribute to one of our wonderful backyard farmer friends, and that will be somebody that most of you recognize. We're now going into regular old questions, so no pictures to help you. But we're going to start with a Wakefield viewer spotted a wasp digging a hole along the front sidewalk, 1.5 to 2 inches long, Jonathan, white colored rings around it. So what is that Wakefield wasp?
That sounds a lot like our friend the cicada killer. You may have seen Jody Green and I's segment on it a couple weeks ago. It's a large wasp, looks large and in charge, has those yellowy white spots on the side, orange wings, kind of a black abdomen and orange head. And they dig a hole in the ground and bury a cicada in there for their eggs to hatch on and feed upon. So it's just something that's out there helping to control the cicadas. If you don't like those particular insects, you like to have the cicada killer around. Not a stinging hazard for people, unless you're a cicada in disguise, but luckily they don't tend to bother us very much.
All right, excellent. Okay, Bill, this is a great question. First off, it starts with this viewer wanting to know how to treat wild violets in the bluegrass lawn. They found triclopyr, they mixed it with a surfactant, but we say 2 treatments in the fall.
Sure.
And the question is, what do we mean by fall? How do we define fall?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Finding triclopyr first that's a really good thing. If you're battling any of the really woody weeds like violets, they're a lot more efficacious on those types of weeds. But then that fall question really transcends all of the perennials we control in the fall. Is it the dandelions and the creeping Charlie? One is fall, one is the second application have to go out. And so a lot of times we talk about after a good hard frost, or even if you're getting a couple frequent frosts, and that generally, depending on the state obviously, is late September into mid-October is kind of a good target window. We talked earlier, last year it was so warm that we didn't really get a lot of hard frosts, and I was going to some of the other guys on Backyard Farmer like Cole and Rock and saying, when do we apply? And there's also light triggers that cause the plant to become more susceptible to those herbicides. So fall, generally, when you start to see those frosts occurring, with some frequency or get a real hard frost, that plant will transition to the dormant response, and it's a lot more easy to control.
All right, thank you, Bill. Okay, Kyle, this is actually, they sent us a picture, but we think we can do this without the photograph.
Fingers are crossed.
Okay, fingers are crossed on that one. And this is sumac, and it's the grow low sumac, one of our usual landscape plants. Has a disease on the foliage, and there are a couple of different diseases that we know attacks that sumac. They want to know what is it and what can they do about it.
Yeah, could be, I guess, any number of few different fungal leaf spots. Anthracnose is a very, very common fungal leaf spot that we have. Especially, you'll tend to see it mainly along the leaf margins. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that can be done this time of year to control a lot of these fungi that are on the trees. A lot of them infected early in the spring, and so you want to do if you do want to do a fungicide application, you want to do that early in the spring, kind of right at that bud break period. As far as what to do this fall, just really sanitation will be your best bet. So if you have the infected leaves as they're dropping, go ahead and pick those leaves up, rake them up and destroy them. Don't compost them, but actually destroy those leaves. And then the other thing that you can do is really work on to prune the trees to increase airflow through there. And that really decreases the amount of time that the leaves stay wet and decreases the amount of time that the fungi have enough moisture to germinate and continue to grow.
All right, and grow low is something that really does need a little bit of work to keep it growing low and not looking like it's got the measles. So, all right, thank you, Kyle. Elizabeth, this is a viewer who wants to know about seed saving. And we actually had a couple of viewers with different plants, but this one in particular wants to know if you can save hybrid cucumber seeds and then use them next year, and if so, is there anything special to do about that?
When it comes to the seeds that we want to save, We don't want to do it on those hybrids. And the reason for that is it takes 2 parents to make the seed. And so what we're getting with that is we're getting a mix of that genetic variability. Now the kicker with those hybrids is we don't know what it pollinated with this time. So we can't guarantee that you're going to get that exact same cucumber next year. You might get something totally different, you might get something similar. So when it comes to saving seeds, what we do is if you want to save them, you save them from an heirloom or some of those that you know have not been cross-pollinated with something else, and then you're going to get that plant back. So I wouldn't recommend that they save their cucumber seeds because they're not going to get that same cucumber back out of it. And if they wanted to, then we would try those heirlooms. And with those heirlooms, you want that cucumber to look as gross as possible. You want it to get as big and yellow and orange as possible because you want those seeds inside to be ripe. You don't pick that cucumber when you would normally want to eat it because you want the seeds to be ripe, and then they're covered in all that gel and goo, and then you want that gel and goo to kind of rot away, and then you save the seeds and dry them that way and keep them cool.
And now we're going to go to Elizabeth with the plants of the week. Elizabeth, what do you have today?
We have some really cool ones. The one in front, the blue one that everybody loves because blue is not a real common one, is the bottle gentian. It's native and it's part sun, moist to average soils. But the cool part, and Jonathan's favorite part, is the only pollinator that can pollinate this is the bumblebee. The reason for that guy has to get deep down in there and spread those parts apart to get in there. So that's the cool part, is only the bumblebee can wiggle their little way in there to pollinate and get the nectar out of there. The grass that we have is the Dallas blue switchgrass, and with some of those switchgrasses we need to stake. So hopefully you were paying attention earlier in the show when we told you you needed to stake your grasses up because this will flop open. It will also flop open if it gets a lot of moisture too. So stake it so that way it doesn't start to go over. There's lots of different new varieties that are out there. This is just one of the really cool blue ones. And then if we look in front, the white flower, what that is from the Seven Suns shrub. And the Seven Sun shrub is what we consider a small/large shrub, 15 to 20 feet. It's not native, but it is really beautiful, and the cool part about it is it's not just the blooms that's showy, it also has really showy bark on it. And the calyx is red, and the downside is we can have some winter dieback on this shrub. But it is a really cool shrub because we do have the flower that's showy, we've got the bark that's showy, so lots of different parts on that, and then a really nice assortment of the blues and whites today.
Awesome, thank you, Elizabeth. And those are all out of our backyard farmer garden, and they do not have downy mildew. Nope. So at least something looks pretty darn good.
Most of it looks good.
There you go. All right, Jonathan, you get the next picture. This is a viewer in Ponca Hills. They were sitting near a maple during the eclipse on Monday, and all of a sudden, here came this otherworldly creature.
It's an alien, for sure.
They want to know what it is, and a friend or a foe.
This is the eastern-eyed click beetle. They are a friend as a larva, as a wireworm. They're a carnivorous wireworm. They're going to eat lots of the different pest species that we have around. And as a click beetle, they have an interesting thing that they can do where they can flex their midsection and make it pop, and then they hop up in the air. I actually brought a dead click beetle with me here today, so everybody can see how large they are. So this is the largest click beetle that we have here in Nebraska, and they are striking for having those eye spots there on their back. The eye spot helps to scare off predators, and the jumping also helps to do that too. So friend, and just an interesting part of the wondrous pageantry of nature, as Fred would say.
Awesome, awesome. And that's weird what insects can do.
Well, and they kind of look like the eclipse, really, when you look at the back
I know,
there.
I know. Very timely. Okay, Bill, this came to us as a tree question.
Yeah.
The tree dates back to 1976, but what it has is these exposed roots that have obviously mower damage. And you get it because it's the often occurring, what do we do about exposed roots, turf under trees, what do we do?
This is another example of those darn trees winning over the turf. They always shade us, they steal our water, our nutrients, and then they bulge out of the ground so we can't mow, and then we have to get rid of the grass. So there's not a lot we recommend in this situation. Our horticulturalists will yell at us for putting any type of soil over this because you don't want to bury the roots, it could kill them and smother them. So If it's a little bit of roots starting to come up, some compost might help. You can try to seed around those areas, but if it's getting to a point now where you can't easily mow, it's more than just, you're getting bounced around by pushing the mower, but you're actually scalping into that tree, and you potentially damage the mower and the tree. You have to kind of get rid of the turf, and the tree wins, unfortunately. So not a lot of good options. Maple trees have this a fair amount. It's kind of unfortunate. Do you have any counter to that, horticulturalist?
I'm so proud of you.
win.
Well, there's no other option. What am I supposed to do? I don't know.
The trees won with the turf guy.
They always win, but everyone blames the turf. So I don't.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Okay, Kyle. This is an aspen that was planted about 10 years ago, or I'm sorry, 10 feet tall. This is an elkhorn. And the leaves are looking dreadful. And if you want an example, those of you who want to see it for real, you can just go right outside and see what those aspens get. What is this and what can they do about it?
Well, it looks to me like it's Marsanina leaf spot. So that's a fungal pathogen. One of the characteristics, and you can kind of see it on the picture, but we have some dark lesions, and then inside of that dark margin is a little bit lighter brown area. And that is pretty typical of Marsanina leaf spot. And it's a fairly common fungal pathogen. And like most of the diseases that I talk about, not a whole lot that can be done this time of year. A lot of the infection occurs early in the spring, and so if you are seeing a lot of chlorotic leaves on that plant and you would like to do a fungicide application, you'll want to do that early in the spring as the buds are breaking, as I've recommended for other tree diseases. However, just raking up the affected foliage and destroying them should be enough to get it through next year.
All right, and unfortunately, all our aspens seem to get that in this part of the state, so live with it.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Elizabeth, you have a couple of ID questions, and really not much more to it other than what is this plant? And this first one, they didn't really give us a lot to work with, so we have a couple of guesses, I think, maybe?
Yes, guesses would be it, because ideally we'd like to have a flower, because that's how we're going to be able to definitively identify a plant is based on its flower. So based upon the foliage that we have, we're thinking it could potentially be an Artemisia, which some of them have a very strong smell to them. I don't know how to explain it, but they stink. And then the other one is going to be possibly one of the Jopai weeds, the Eupatoriums. Again, the flower would really help out to get that identification down to exactly what is going on. But those are our two best guesses, and next year if they can catch a flower, we'll be able to give them a better answer then.
Right, or even give us a bigger picture.
A bigger
for the
picture,
variegated.
yep.
Yeah, and then your second one is actually a wildflower. She found this growing all over a small hillside in rural Cass County. She also wants to know whether she can transplant it to her own home.
So this one I've seen before when we were near a river, and what it is it's called the spotted touch-me-not. So the plant lady that I am, I looked at it and I said, that's an impatient. Sure enough, it's an impatient. So it does have that seed pod on it. So if she wanted to try to get some of those seeds, she could. I don't know how successful she's going to be if she tries to transplant it, but it's worth a shot. The area that I saw it was near a river, so it was really wet. And so that might be something else to keep in mind too, is it the right location for that plant? But the spotted touch-me-not, and it's a type of impatient.
All right, excellent. Thank you all. Well, unfortunately, we had to say goodbye and happy retirement to wonderful Gladys Jurink this year, who answered the phones on Backyard Farmer. You might also have noticed that we do not have Fred Baxendale in the insect chair, and he has not been in that chair all season. Fred has also chosen to retire. We are giving him just a wonderful tribute as a beloved, devoted part himself of nature's wondrous pageantry.
It's all part of nature's wondrous pageantry. Don't worry about them.
And we have Fred Baxendale, UNL Extension entomologist.
Peggy,
Good to be here also.
Good to see you, Fred.
Warm weather's bringing out the bugs. That's good from my perspective, at least.
Good time for you bug guys.
As we've been doing the video, I've been watching this wonderful dragonfly flying back and forth, and I'm sure that you may have seen that. Here it is right in front of me now. Gonna pose for the camera. Again, this is one of the wonderful natural enemies that we see associated with the pond.
Okay, Fred, speaking of fruit, this is not you.
Thanks, Kim.
Sorry.
Fred, I just want to let you know how grateful I am to you for all that I've learned from you. You have been my mentor. The energy that you have and the passion for insects became contagious for me. And I'm always impressed at how you can walk out into a landscape and look around. Oh, look up in the tree. There's a katydid up there. And oh, down here, look at that stag beetle right there. And I'll go, where? And so you had a real keen radar for all those things that I will not attain to the same level as the master. But what I have learned from you cannot be put in enough words in terms of my gratitude for what I have enjoyed from your instruction, your being a colleague, your editing publications, etc. I've learned a lot, and so I thank you so very much.
Fred, I just wanted to thank you so much for all the help that you have given me over the years, particularly in relation to Backyard Farmer Show. I remember when I first started as a panelist, how encouraging you were to me as I got going, and helping me to feel like I knew what I was talking about and that I was doing a good job answering questions, and I just really appreciated all the support that you gave me. So thank you very much.
Hey Fred, just want to say it's been awesome having you on air with me for the last 26 years. You're one of the patriarchs, and you've always been sort of a mentor on this show to me. And not having you on Backyard is kind of like that table with the one wobbly leg. It's just never quite right. So you not being on Backyard just isn't quite right. But thanks for all the memories, thanks for all the great information, and thanks for always remembering your famous 3 words, nature's wondrous pageantry. Take care, buddy.
Fred, it's been great. You taught me so much about entomology, and being on Backyard Farmer with you was always a pleasure. And to add to that, you even like snakes. What a great person to be with. Have a great time in the rest of your life, and have fun.
Fred, thank you very much for all your expertise, enthusiasm, and mentoring to me and all the rest of us over the years. You've left a great legacy and a lot of folks who really admire you. And truly, you are part of nature's wondrous pageantry. Have a great career.
Fred, I just want to wish you all the best as you go on, and thank you so much for all the enthusiasm that you've shared over the years on Backyard Farmer, and the example that you've given me on how to grow into being a panel member. And just again, thanks so much, Fred.
Fred, we already miss your enthusiasm, your energy, the great things you used to say about the life cycle of those insects. And most importantly, you thought everything was nature's wondrous pageantry.
It's fair to say that Backyard Farmer has been one of, if not the most professionally rewarding activities that I've had in my professional career as an extension educator, extension specialist at the University of Nebraska. Woolly bear caterpillar, one of my very favorite insects, and certainly all part of nature's wondrous pageantry.
Our new bug guys in the chair, but at some point all of us get long enough in the tooth that we ought to say goodbye, and he went out gracefully and is enjoying his own piece of nature's wondrous pageantry. All right, you guys are going to have to come up with a new catchphrase, you know.
Oh, no. No.
Not happening. All right, you get the next picture, though, Jonathan. So this is a person who actually titled this as a termite ant, all one word. And she says there were tons and tons of them, dead and alive, no wood close. They were in the sand. The birds, of course, she's thinking she's going to have fat birds. And she's in Cedar Creek, Nebraska, and she wonders really what this is.
It's interesting. I get a lot of questions about if ants have bred with something else, like 1950s sci-fi movies are happening in people's yards. This is not a termite ant. It's a rove beetle, from what I can see here. Rove beetles are very interesting beetles. They're predators, and when they are growing, they have these weird wings. Beetles have elytra. They have these hard wings on top. That's what gives lady beetles their beautiful red and black dots. It's what gives green June beetles their green color. And it covers up their soft wings that are underneath. Rove beetles, they only get this short top wing, this short elytra. And it doesn't quite cover everything up. And so when you look at that beetle, that's what you're seeing on top there of the clear wings underneath. And they fold them up underneath those elytra, but sometimes they let them out so they can fly away. And then it's got the big bitey bits in the front there to help it be a very beneficial predator. It's something that we like to have in the landscape to eat lots of pests.
In other words, she does not have to call the pest control.
No need for Terminex or anything like that.
All right, good. All right, Bill, this is a weed question.
Okay.
In Giltner, Nebraska, but it's one that pretty much everybody who grows anything can identify.
Yeah, so that's it's an annual. It's a spotted spurge. It's something that we see kind of in thin areas. Again, it comes up in the cracks between my pavers in my backyard, and you're always pulling it. And if you cut it, it's surging spurge, right? It's an annual though, so right now it's a taproot. Just go in there and just yank it out and see how big of a specimen you can pull in one. That's really the best recommendation for that guy. So there are some pre's that can work okay on it. I think Gallery does, but again, that'll be done in the spring.
All right, and it's such a bitty thing. You can kind of ignore it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't.
Yeah, maybe. All right, Kyle, this is a Frontier County garden, Stockville, Nebraska. She has raised potatoes for 60 years and has never had them grow like this. They're hardly usable. She wonders what they did wrong. Is this disease-based? Is this environmental? Or what do you think here?
Yeah, so some more just really deformed vegetables. And I do not think that it's disease. I think that it's a stress disorder. So it's something abiotic. When you get that deformed growth or the extra, the knobbiness on the potatoes, that can be caused by fluctuations in temperature and moisture. And so especially when we're dealing with, if you have some really hot weather and then you get a lot of moisture right after that hot weather, as the tubers are rapidly expanding, there can be some cells that divide a little bit strangely, and they cause those knobs to form as well. One of the nice things about it is, while you may not be able to sell those potatoes, they will still be fine to eat. So you can eat them, if you don't mind something a little bit gnarly looking on your salad. The other thing about those potatoes, if you are looking to control this in the future, you'll want to use one of those shorter tuber varieties. And so those long tuber varieties tend to be much more susceptible to that knobbiness that can form on the potatoes.
All right, so, and again, who knows what's happening in this year in particular.
Yeah, it's been a tough year for plants.
Exactly. All right, Elizabeth, your final question with a picture is this viewer said this particular plant showed up in 3 locations in her garden this year, and she's never had it before, and she kind of wonders what it is, and is it a keeper?
Well, yeah, we hard to get rid of. What it is it's garlic chives. And garlic chives are fairly aggressive. So where it's in the landscape bed type of a situation, you want to try to get rid of it and try to pull it out and maybe even use some chemistry, like a product like Roundup on that area, or you're going to have to read and do some research on what's going to work best on garlic chives, because I'm not 100% sure Roundup's going to work on them. But the garlic chives, like I said, are aggressive. depends on your outlook on if you want to keep them. If you want to keep them, they will continue to spread. If you don't want to keep them, try to get after them and keep after them as quickly and as completely as possible, because you're going to have them for a while.
Or at least cut the seed heads off, or they will travel all the way up your gravel driveway.
There you go.
At my house.
There you go.
In case you wonder how aggressive they can be. Well, we do announcements of wonderful, fun things in the gardening world, and we all know it doesn't end when the season ends. And one of the best things in our announcement tonight is we are going to Kimmel Orchard September 11th. We will be live to tape again, and that'll be a great experience. We've been at Kimmel before, and we invite anybody who wants to come join us at Kimmel, and of course, eat an apple while you're down there. So we have time for just a handful more questions, Jonathan. This is actually also still a cicada question.
Okay.
And this particular viewer said he does have cicada killers by the swarms. He knows they're harmless, but he's got children, they're petrified of them. He knows where the holes are. What? We've answered this before, but apparently it's still happening.
Sure. So when you're trying to treat for a cicada killer nest, you're going to be trying to use a dust product, hopefully down into that nest. A dust pyrethroid insecticide would be best, because I think that one mentioned an aerosol product that they fired down in there.
Raid or something.
A Raid product.
Yeah.
What's going to happen there is it's going to soak into the soil, and it's not really going to be effective against the wasp. You want a powder that's going to coat them and kill them that way. So try and find a pyrethroid dust. You can buy them online, sometimes find them in gardening stores, and hopefully that will help to cure some of your cicada killers and help your kids to not be afraid.
Exactly. All right. Bill, this is a question from the Panhandle. They have a bluegrass/brome lawn.
Okay.
And they're wondering when and what they should fertilize with, and should it be something that has fertilizer plus the weed control in it?
I wouldn't do I don't like the fertilizer with the weed control, because you have to have that granule stick to the leaf, and then we know, especially out in western Nebraska, but across most of the state in the fall, it dries out a lot. So we don't always have the humidity that's required for those prills to stick as well. I'd rather just spray the weed control and use the fertilizer separately. A fertilizer application now would be pretty good, and if it's a thin lawn, you want to build it up a little bit more. Another application in that part of the state, early October would be great. Nothing after Halloween, that's part of the state.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Bill. Kyle, we have a viewer who has a linden, over 20 years old. The leaves are turning yellow and dropping like crazy, white milky fluid kind of coming.
Okay.
And we actually had a question from one of our audience members earlier about this too. What is this?
Yeah, so that white milky fluid that we're starting to see come out of a few different trees now, a couple of lindens primarily, is the result of a bacterial pathogen. And the bacteria, it's an anaerobic bacteria, and so once that bacteria starts to ferment inside of the tree, it will actually produce a whole bunch of gases, and those gases then force that white slime out of the cracks in the bark. And you may even see some bubbles in there if you look at it really closely. That's slime flux, and it tends to be commonly associated with just general stresses of the trees. And that's probably why the leaves are starting to drop as well. And so I would recommend just doing ensuring plenty of water for the tree, as well as doing a good fertilizer program.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Elizabeth, you have 20 seconds to answer the question about what do you kill small hackberries and other woody plants that have been cut off with, so that you can do something different.
Okay, you want to do a cut stump treatment. So you want to cut again and have a fresh cut, dab it with a glyphosate product like Roundup, and that's going to give you your best kill. You don't want to go through and cut and then go through and dab. You want to do it at the same time, otherwise it'll start to seal over.
Awesome, I knew you could do it.